Welcome to Unbiased Recovery, sponsored by Meta Addiction Treatment. I'm Ed LePage.
I'm Casey Herlihy.
So we couldn't get a guest tonight.
No one wanted to come on.
No, it's cold.
It's cold, it's dark out now.
It's dark. It's real dark.
Yeah, it's starting to get depressing.
It's that time of year.
It's that time of year. I don't want to get out of bed in the morning.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But you do.
I do. I get up every day.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's like...
God willing.
It's a constant.
It's a constant thing that I bring into, my daily actions.
Your daily practice?
Yeah, one of them is getting out of bed.
That's a good practice.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't seen you since the last podcast.
I've tried to make it that way.
Right, yeah. On purpose?
That's what I meant by I've tried to make it that way.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah, I also skipped a couple weeks, so it could be a longer time in between.
Right, yeah.
Ari really wore us out.
I was very tired. I was tired, but it was good.
Did you see a comment on one of the posts that we did about that somebody said, "Where has the best steak tips?"
No. Is that for real?
Yeah, it was my father.
Oh man, that's great. I get into debates with people about steak tips quite often.
We were just talking about steak tips. Steak tips are a common theme on this podcast, but we also are here to talk about recovery.
Right.
Right.
More importantly.
Yeah, more importantly than steak tips. So something that happened somewhat recent. So we're into December now, but the presidential election came along with a lot of other elections and ballot propositions and questions and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
I guess this is a somewhat political topic, but not to be political.
Right.
The decriminalization of drugs happened in Oregon.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think
not something I ever thought I would see in my lifetime, to be honest. Decriminalization of any illicit substance.
Right. Is it illicit anymore if it's decriminalized?
Not anymore.
That's interesting.
But it was before.
It was illicit.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? So I have this statistic right here, and
Right.
so I was doing my research.
Right.
Slightly, I read a blog article.
I read one blog.
I read and you know what?
And
I skimmed it.
I skimmed it.
I
said that looks like
I
something
read
to
the
talk about.
headlines within the blog, and
Yeah,
then I
that's all
formed
you
an
need.
opinion on it, and
Yeah.
now I'm going to tell you it.
When it's in bold.
But this actually is not bold. The benefit of decriminalizing drugs is that we would free up prison space, which I don't necessarily like the idea that we're freeing
it up.
Like, I would rephrase that into we're releasing people from prison or not imprisoning people.
For nonviolent crimes, maybe.
And it says just 16% of current prisoners, according to information from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, commit violent crimes to obtain money that they use to purchase drugs. That would reduce overcrowding or reduce confinement costs and provide options for prisoner rehabilitation that do not currently exist. So only 16% of people that are in prison for drugs have a violent offense along with that.
Yeah. Now,
or maybe I misspoke, but anyways.
So, I myself have never been to jail or prison, but I have a lot of friends that have, and drug use in prison and jail is extremely common.
Rampant, yeah.
Yeah, and there's obviously there's no real treatment options in there.
Right.
Sometimes you might get a commitment, or they can get a psychologist, or what have you. But so people that are nonviolent offenders that go to jail specifically for possession of drugs,
right.
or even
even
distribution, depending. I think it's dependent upon the
amount and reason for.
Exactly.
I mean,
there's different variables. Do I think it's right? No. Does it happen? Do some people get caught up in something? Yes.
Well, I think so. Here's something, right? Sorry to cut you off, but
fine.
I hardly know any drug users that at least get to the point of actually becoming addicted to drugs.
Yeah.
That did not sell drugs. At least on some level.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Because
Not everybody's
was I
like
gonna-
setting
was I-
up shop to sell drugs.
No,
but like,
was I going to sell my drug of choice? No. But if I could flip something else in order to get my drug of choice, absolutely.
or if you had the money to buy, 10 grams of something,
and I'd
and you could
cut it, flip it, keep exactly. Right.
and
So
regardless of what drug it was, you
yeah,
know what
it
I mean?
doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I'm trying to make a profit on something so that I can get
keep
what I want.
using longer,
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the main basis behind it.
extend the amount of money that you have.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends that, I had one friend who I guess was a success. I don't know how you say
Successful drug dealer.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up passing away because of his addiction. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
coincided with
unfortunately
each
what
other.
happens.
Yeah, it does. It's sad.
Well, and that's so. I'm not letting you get your full point because you're taking too long, but
Right.
so.
I feel like Ari. He's getting shit on and interrupted.
But we gotta move things along here sometimes.
Speed it up.
So the idea of that though, right, where like somebody gets imprisoned because of their addiction, right?
Right.
Because like what you're describing with your friend there is like somebody that supported his drug use through drug dealing.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Nonviolent, probably.
Completely nonviolent.
Okay. And actually, like, over time, what this article also said was that since, like, the 1980s, with the loosening of drug laws,
Yeah.
the cases of homicide related to drugs has dropped.
That makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if you're gonna have a lesser charge, you're not more inclined to feel like you have to like defend yourself.
There's not
to
so
the
many
ultimate-
guns involved.
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
You're taking some of that stuff out of the
Right.
equation. But if you take away the idea of jail and you have these diversion programs where people are actually given the opportunity for treatment instead of jail. So one of the things about this was like it reduces the stigma
right.
by decriminalizing it.
Yeah, I mean it does, and I guess to get to the point I was gonna make is that when someone goes to prison or jail for a nonviolent drug offense, it's almost robbing them of the opportunity to otherwise go to treatment.
Yeah.
And that being said, I think treatment. I mean, it is getting better and more prevalent, but
Right.
There's definitely a lack of options for a lot of people, I would say.
Yeah, no, of course, there really is. And I think there's a lack of options. And then there's also a lot of options that are out there for... It really depends where you live, right?
It does.
It does. It depends a lot on where you live. And I think just, like, the knowledge around treatment really just still isn't there. Like...
Yeah, it's like you and I talked about, like the first time in treatment or detox, I had no idea what to do. You know what I mean? It's like you're lost. You have no idea.
And it sucks, right? Because so much comes down to like, we live in a managed care system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where treatment needs to be evidence-based, which treatment should be evidence-based, right? And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but we live in a world where, so much of what somebody gets out of treatment is predicated off of, the ability for somebody to show the need for them to be in treatment. And oftentimes with that comes like the idea that like, oh, this person hasn't relapsed before getting treatment, so they don't need to be in it as long.
Right, which is not the case.
Well, it's just not the case, right?
Right.
And like, I mean, I think we can probably all agree that like the more treatment up until a certain point, but
Right.
that certain point's like way down the road.
It can be counter,
Eventually.
Eventually.
Right, but like, 6-9 months of treatment, like it's
I
not.
think that's completely.
Yeah, that's not harming an individual.
I mean, the more opportunity that I have to change and grow,
right.
is the better.
Well, and I think that the less money that we're spending on imprisoning people, trying to find people that are committing a nonviolent offense. I won't say victimless thing,
Right,
because
It's not-
there's
right.
unintended victims of drug use and abuse,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
But the idea that like somebody is wronging society to such a degree by using a chemical to make themselves feel okay just seems somewhat archaic.
It does. Yeah, it's like it's not with the times. You know what I mean? Everything else has progressed quite a bit, but the way that people look at drug addicts, has there been advances? Yes. Like,
Oh yeah.
but at the same time, it's still kind of like, even if you look on Mass Ave and like, they incorporated they're just trying to just keep them.
Well, it looks like you have a bunch of caged
It
individuals.
does, yeah, and it's sad.
It's not. I mean, regardless of the intent, it's not a good look.
Right.
And I'm not saying that like, oh, it's a bad look for the city because there's drug addicts on the street. Well, like,
Right.
no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like when you cage individuals, like
It just doesn't look good.
no, it doesn't look good, and like I think we can do better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think that decriminalizing drugs allows the general public to see people that use drugs in a different light.
Yeah.
They're no longer criminals.
Right, and that's because, even like growing up, it's like you think of someone that does drugs as they're inherently a bad person.
Yeah, and it's like it's the whole idea of like DARE, right? Like
Yes.
the DARE program, like from all standpoints, a entirely failed idea.
Right.
Um,
I just bought a Dare hat online.
yeah, as a joke,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Insensitive one, but
Yeah.
the idea that like we can like sort of like take away from like something like that and talk to people more about like connection with other human beings, about treatment, about mental health, right?
Yeah.
About like the things that drive somebody to the point where they need to use some substance that is not actually beneficial to their lives to make themselves feel okay.
Yeah.
It's crazy that like to me that we're putting people in jail for that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you talked about the the mental health aspect, which I think is a huge part of addiction essentially. If I had something wrong with like one of my organs or whatever, or some disease of my body, people are more apt to be like, anything we can do.
Yeah,
blah,
feel
blah,
bad
blah.
for you.
But
Like,
if something's wrong up here, if I'm depressed or anxious or something, people kind of
well, people don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do.
And that's where I think there's so much education needed, right? Where it's like, do I think we can educate people about drugs to a point where they don't use drugs? I almost think that that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, it's like how much can I warn someone about it, or like it's scare tactics are not going to
Well,
work.
like to me, like I remember being in high school, never really having done any drug and being like, cocaine. People use that and it's illegal. It must feel great.
Right.
Like
It must do something.
it must do something that makes it worthwhile.
Because they're not just doing it because it's illegal.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not just like out here trying to get in trouble.
Right.
At least I wasn't.
No, I don't think anybody is. So I think educating people around like mental health and ways of actually caring for themselves and actually like dealing with life,
Right.
Is a much better use of time and resources than trying to scare people from doing drugs and
Yeah.
then locking them up for doing them.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because at the end of the day, what I believe is that the drugs and alcohol weren't essentially my problem. The problem is that how I handle life, or that I'm using them as a solution to something that I don't really even know what's wrong, or something that I'm trying to fix. So if you go into it with the idea that you're going to inform people or young kids more about their mental health and stuff, then maybe they won't feel the need to experiment.
Well, essentially that's what I mean. It's like
Right.
if you sort of normalize the conversation around mental health to the same degree that you normalize the conversation around having a headache.
Yeah.
Nobody doesn't tell somebody they have a headache because they're afraid that people are going to judge them
Yeah,
for
they're
it.
not like, why do you have a headache? What's
Yeah,
wrong? Like,
what the fuck is wrong with
yeah,
you?
just get up and don't have a headache.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you tell someone you're depressed, they're like, well, why don't you just be happy? It's like, well, that's not really how it works.
Well, yeah, so you know what? That's a great idea. Why don't I try that?
Yeah, I
It's
would
the same
love
as when
to.
you tell a drug addict, like, why don't you just not use drugs?
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I would love to not do this
But
anymore.
that sounds like a really fucking great idea.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah,
me do
It
that.
doesn't make any sense to me. But that's and that comes from a place of ignorance. You know what I mean?
It does.
People do
And not ignorance in a
bad
that
way.
like you're a bad person,
no,
but
but just
without knowledge, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. They're without knowledge of that subject. And it leaves people, like, especially with drug use, it leaves people like baffled, and they don't understand. Why does he keep going out, or he or she keep going out and doing this, knowing that they're going to suffer these consequences.
And it's the same as a depressed person, right?
Exactly.
Not everybody that has depression, like, we have this picture of somebody that is a drug addict or an alcoholic that drinks out of a brown paper bag and shoots heroin in a Wendy's, bathroom.
Yeah.
We also have this picture of a depressed person that's like downtrodden and poor and without a job and has a broken down car, but that's not true.
It has nothing to do with it.
Like that person could be the happiest person on earth, but at the same time, there could be somebody living in a 7-bedroom house with 20 bathrooms and want
equally as miserable.
Want to kill themselves.
Right.
I
was thinking about that the other day. It's like, I used to play music, and I remember that I would be
really,
I would be playing, and everybody's like focused on you. You're playing and stuff, and I would like. It sounds kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Cliche, but like I honestly like felt so alone.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like I felt like completely alone, even though I had all these people.
And it was what you wanted to be doing. It was the pinnacle of what you wanted.
Exactly.
And I think that's where people get so confused around this conversation around mental health. And I think that it's a lot of I think. But like,
I mean, yeah.
But I mean, to a great degree, like when we take the focus off of shunning people for certain things and the focus off of making people like a scapegoat for something and locking them up and shutting them away and not dealing with it and bad, but we can actually like help people on the front end.
Yeah.
We can devote resources, right? Because I think that's a lot of times people are like, oh, well, we're going to give all those resources to drug addicts, like, blah, 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 blah. Well, like, like you're going to spend $40,000 a year keeping them incarcerated, if not more. I honestly don't know.
I don't know the statistics.
I think it's probably a lot more than that.
Probably. And what would you rather? Someone having the possible opportunity to get better and become an active member of society again, or someone that like could possibly go to prison and inherently make their lives worse, or their drug problem worse, or
yeah, I mean, how many people reoffend, right? It's not like this massive rehabilitation system that we have set up. We live in a world where there's privatized prisons, and the prison industrial complex is a real thing. That a lot of reasons why we don't see, and I'm sort of going down a rabbit hole here a little bit, and might sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is true. States like California have laws like a 3-strike law because they set up these privatized prisons and guaranteed that they would have 90% occupancy in these contracts that they set up.
So they need to make sure
they
it's
need
like
to make sure they need to make sure that there's prisoners.
Right, which is wild.
It's
I didn't know. I didn't know that.
It's fucked.
Yeah,
it really is. And it promotes things like people that have nonviolent offenses being imprisoned.
Yeah,
because they essentially have to pay for that person being there regardless.
Yeah.
And when are people going to be enraged about things? They're going to be enraged about things. People get enraged about things when they affect them.
Right. But until that happens,
and they affect them when people vote for their wallet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like a state like that they can't be paying for people that aren't there.
Right.
People will catch on to that. People will be pissed.
Yeah. Like, why are we paying for this if it's not a necessity?
And, it's... And I think people are starting to wake up to that idea. Yeah. I think that you see a lot of people... a lot of memes online making fun of like Oregon for decriminalizing drugs and
Oregon Trail,
yeah, but like I think people have the wrong idea that it's not so that like
it's not so you can just have this free use of drugs and
it's not so you can like just go smoke crack on the wherever you want.
That's not what it's about.
It's so that the person that like is smoking crack can get the help that they need.
Exactly. Right. It's
and I think that's what it is too. There was something within that bill that if people are using certain substances, they need to see a drug and alcohol counselor.
Right.
It's not just like
slap on the wrist,
or not even a
$50
slap on
fine
the
or
wrist.
something.
It's like, you know what, we're gonna not slap you on the wrist. We're gonna help you.
Right. It's like instead of being
It's a
like,
hug versus a
why
slap.
do you keep doing this? I'm gonna lock you up or whatever. It's like, what can I do to help? You know what I mean? Instead of obviously finding underlying issues is extremely important, but in the beginning, I think it should be personally think more focused on what can I do to help right now, opposed to why.
Well, yeah, it's a solution focused therapy,
Yeah.
right? So solution focused therapy is essentially a short term therapy, normally like 10 to 12 sessions
Yep.
of like, what can we concretely do to help you move along in a positive direction?
Right.
Versus like finding out the underlying causes and
Right.
conditions.
It's kind
and
of almost like setting up like term goals.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a lot of it.
Yeah.
That's a big aspect
Right.
of it. So
Because when you start like, accomplishing those small term goals, it's like you gain momentum. Oh, if I can do this, then maybe I can do this. And
yeah, and then you know what? Then you can go to that counselor and you can dive into trauma, right?
Right.
Because like honestly, what we're doing in criminalizing drug use is like, if you look at statistics, like 70% of drug addicts that go to treatment report having 2 or more adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
Like they have an ACE score, so
Yeah.
ACE is adverse childhood experiences, and I think there's 10 of them, and the average 70% of people that seek treatment for drug and alcohol use have a score of 2 or higher.
Which is indicative of post-traumatic stress, right?
Well,
Is that what you're talking-
yeah,
just
essentially,
trauma? Yeah.
trauma,
Okay,
right?
yeah.
So, somebody that's experienced trauma is a victim, right?
Right.
So, like, what we're doing by criminalizing drug use and imprisoning drug users is we're re-victimizing victims,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're prosecuting people that are suffering, and
Yeah.
that, like, what does that do? Like, what type
How is
of
that helping?
society does that?
Right. Like you said, it's archaic.
It really is,
Right.
in a lot of senses. And I'm not saying that like we should have this place where like, everybody's like shooting heroin on the side of the street. That's by no means what I'm promoting. I think
Right.
I truly believe if you look at a country like Portugal
Yeah.
that has decriminalized drugs and has had drugs decriminalized for, gosh, what is it?
Years.
Last like 12 years
Yeah.
or so now. And they've put things in place like they've put more money into treatment. They incentivize people, hiring people that are coming out of treatment
Yeah, they
programs.
help them
Like
get jobs
they not only do they help them get jobs, but they go to the place and they say, you know what, we will pay half of this person's first year's salary if you're willing to hire them.
Give them a chance.
Yeah, give them a chance.
Right.
You say they make $20 an hour, we'll pay 10.
Right.
And so like giving people a purpose. Right? Like,
Yeah.
like...
I mean, that's a huge part of it is finding purpose. 'Cause
Right.
You
so much of recovery, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It just gives you that drive to, like, kind of keep going.
Yeah,
You know what
so, I mean, and there's other, benefits, and like, it's not a plan that's without flaw, but it says, it can support lower addiction rates and substance abuse rates, and encourages people to remain within society. We talked about that a lot. It changes how society see people. We talked about
Yes.
that. It allows the criminal justice system to focus on what it does best. So actually going after people that are truly victimizing people.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
It's not the same as legalization.
Right.
It's not just saying like this blanket
It's not
is
a
okay.
free-for-all.
Right.
Yeah.
Could reduce violence in society.
Yeah.
Mental health access. Talks about violence again. Reduces secretive behavior, right?
Yeah.
It brings something to the forefront.
Yeah.
It allows us to seek the help that we need.
Right, be more comfortable
I had
asking.
a really, really loving family, and like I knew to a large degree that they needed to know and they needed to be aware of my addiction if I was ever going to get help
Yeah.
and stay sober.
Still
and I
extremely difficult.
I still hid it from them.
Of
You know what I
course,
mean?
Yeah, because it's like I don't know if I was embarrassed or if like, but one of the big reasons for me doing that is I was scared they were going to take the one thing away from me that made me feel all right.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You know?
It's and then here's the drawbacks, right? It may encourage experimentation.
Yeah.
Could, right?
It could,
There-
absolutely.
there's no doubt in that.
If a kid thinks that, okay, I'm not going to have as great of a consequence legally from this, I might try it.
Could. It would reduce prices.
Yeah.
The treatment infrastructures are not present yet. There's
Right.
not enough access to treatment.
Yeah.
Right?
That's definitely a big issue.
Decriminalization can lead to legalization. Could.
It could.
I mean, we've seen it with marijuana.
We have, yeah.
I would argue that has not been a bad thing
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Safety problems could become worse rather than better. Driving while intoxicated, all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And those are the drawbacks, right?
Right.
And I think one of the major ones that you sort of raised an eyebrow to was the idea that it could increase experimentation.
Yeah.
I wonder on that one. I really do.
Yeah, I do too, because I honestly, I don't think when I first started doing drugs that I ever thought about a legal consequence, to be completely honest.
I think I did. I know I did. But I think that one of the crazy things that, especially like, we started using drugs before marijuana had become decriminalized in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I think the idea that like marijuana's gateway drug, there's some validity to that, right?
I think so too.
And then there's some idea that
In certain people.
right, and alcohol is a gateway drug. Trauma is really the gateway.
I
But
agree.
anyways, if you look at it that way, right? I think it's crazy because like, to me, like, marijuana, especially in things like Dare,
Yeah.
were like described in the same light as heroin and crack cocaine.
Yes. You know,
And-
I specifically remember being lied to. A guy came in and said that he had like stage 4 lung cancer from smoking weed.
Yeah.
I've never.
Well,
I mean,
you
have you
don't-
ever heard of that?
I wouldn't say that you necessarily know.
I googled that.
Did you Google?
Yes, and I've never seen.
You should have Binged it.
What's Bing? Is that better than Google?
No,
Oh, all right.
it's not. Ask Jeeves. Remember that?
Yeah, Ask Jeeves was awesome.
Ask Jeeves sucked.
Jeeves didn't know anything.
Jeeves knew shit.
Yeah, Jeeves would give me the wrong directions
Yeah.
to go someplace.
Jeeves,
Fuck you, Jeeves.
the idea that you could just type a question into Ask Jeeves was not true.
Not true. Lots of things Jeeves didn't know.
Jeeves did not know shit.
Google is much better.
Google is a little bit better.
Yeah, you can find anything out.
Bing's even better. But I think like at that point in time, like you would use marijuana and you'd see like I'm not promoting drug use. I really not.
Oh, yeah,
but
of
like
course.
the idea that like everybody that does marijuana is going to become addicted to it and it's going to ruin your life. And then you saw that
Yeah.
didn't happen.
And then
You're like,
they lied.
oh, they lied about this.
They probably lied about everything else.
Maybe all these other things were a lie too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think the idea, like decriminalizing things, I think that there's a large degree of people that use drugs doing it because it's a rebellious act,
Yeah.
right?
I did that with cigarettes when I was young. I
Yeah.
specifically smoked cigarettes because I knew that I was being like a little shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I wanted attention.
You're a badass.
I was a badass. You know what I mean?
did
Walking to
you
school.
did you roll the cigarettes up in your white sleeve on your t-shirt like you're in the
I wish
1950s or
oh man, that would have been so cool.
Grease Lightning?
That was a great movie. I used to watch that all the time.
I'm sure you did. I thought you were a movie buff.
I'm not.
Okay. I don't know. I don't see that.
Yeah.
I don't see decriminalization leading to experimentation with harder drugs.
You know, I think people are going to experiment regardless of the legal consequences.
Fair enough.
You know?
And I think that the more education around mental health and the more stable that people are, and the more that people are able to be okay without the use of a substance that they know has inherent risks associated with it, the less experimentation you would see.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
truly do.
No, I agree with that. I think mental health is just like it's such a huge aspect of just like everybody's well-being. You know what I
Right.
mean? And it's something that is just not focused on.
Everybody has mental health.
Everybody.
Right? Everybody does.
Every single person.
And to think that like you have to be okay all the time, and to not be okay is not okay.
Right.
Is, it's like somebody that has a headache thinking that there's something wrong with them for having a headache.
Right. It's not like it's not something you have to be ashamed of. You know what I mean?
You're not an inherently flawed individual because you're depressed.
Right. Exactly. It's just
You're suffering from a mental health issue, and there is help. There is hope, and it doesn't need to involve you self-medicating because you're ashamed, and in large degree shamed by society for feeling that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen, particularly I guess with like famous people, is like a lot of more of them like kind of speaking out about that.
Yeah.
And then you get the people that are like, well, you're rich, like it doesn't, like how could you feel like that? It
doesn't-
has nothing to do with your internal
Nothing
condition.
to do with it.
Absolutely
And
not.
I think just like the idea of being able to take the focus off of criminalizing people for not being okay, and showing people new tools and better tools and ways to cope is more important.
Absolutely.
And that's all we got for tonight.
Thanks, guys.
So thanks for tuning in.